Okay, so the first thing you're going to want to do when building a team is you're going to need a defensive type character. Mainly someone like March or Natasha is also really good. Especially because later on, she's going to be able to provide not only sustain, but a cleanse, which is going to be really helpful. And if you've rolled on this current banner, the Sealy banner, then chances are you might actually have some constellations on her. The second character that you're going to need is some sort of what I like to call center, the main character of your team. This character is most likely going to be someone who specializes in high single target damage, like Thrift Shop Zhao, also known as Dan, or if you're lucky like me, get Yang Qing and specialize in doing a lot of high single target damage. The next slot is gonna most likely be a character that specializes in either buffing or debuffing or providing some sort of utility. Someone like Harmony, Ronnie, I think her name is. For me personally, I like to use Ting Yun. And then the last character is going to be most likely a flex slot. So basically any character where you feel like you're missing something that can be fulfilled for your team. Maybe that's going to be some more defense. You can go with like the Fire Blazer, or maybe you need some more damage. For me personally, this is what I like to do, is I like to choose another damage character of the opposing element type of my main DPS character. So Yang Qing is an ice character, but whenever he's up against an enemy that is resistant to ice, I'm kind of screwed. So I decided to put in Hook, so that way I'm not screwed when I fight an ice character, and instead I just transfer my Ting Yun buffs to Hook. And the Forgotten Hall, chances are you're actually going to want to use more than one of the same element. However, I would not go more than two. So I would not choose more than like 2 cryo characters or 2 Genshin terminology. 2 physical characters, anything like that. You don't want like 3 physical characters, because then you're just gonna really gimp yourself, and any enemy that you come across, you're most likely is gonna resist you. And baseline enemies have a 20% resistance, and then another 10% resistance when they have that white bar. I would not recommend going more of the same type of character though. Like for example, I would not recommend going to healers. For example, like not going Natasha and that 5-star character that I can't think of the name, because then you're just losing out on too much damage and you're going to be over sustaining healing, and it's just going to be a wasted slot. So after you've kind of figured out your team setup, the next thing you're going to want to look at is the actual formatting of your team. So the position in which your team is in actually has a major impact in how the fight goes. There are 2 ideas behind this. So the first idea is that you want one of your characters to be protected, and you don't want them to take damage. So for example, let's just switch in the Fire Blazer. So the Fire Blazer can taunt enemies. But if a boss has a cleave attack and is taunted by the Fire Blazer, that means my Yang Qing is also going to get hit. And I don't want my Yang Qing to get hit, so I might move him over towards the end instead, like this. So now anytime the enemy is taunted and there is some sort of like AoE attack that hits multiple targets, only my Hook, Fire Blazer, and potentially Ting Yun is going to get hurt, while my Yang Qing is going to stay the same. The other way of making use of positions within the team is not only for characters to avoid being taking damage, but also so that you make and ensure that characters take damage. So for example, let's take the Fire Blazer again, right? And then, okay, well, I got Himiko. I rolled on the Sealy banner. I got Himiko. I'm still depressed about it, but let's just imagine that this is Sealy, okay? So Sealy is a character that chains based on kills. So the more damage that you deal, and the faster and more enemies that you kill, the greater effect that she has in battle. And so to best make use of that, you can use someone like Steppo Nechan, right? And you use his E skill, he taunts the enemies, maybe they use like an AoE attack. Now, Sealy is being also affected by that, and she's going to generate energy too. Because if you don't know, energy is generated when you use your skill, auto attack, and also when you're hit by an enemy. If you want more of a potentially riskier playstyle, or you can offset the damage somehow. Then you can do this high risk, high reward type playstyle where you generate a lot of energy. You're also taking a lot of damage, and that can be applied to any sort of character. Maybe there's a really strong support character that values having a lot of energy. Then you would want them to take damage as well, so that again they can recharge a lot of energy. There's also one additional thing that the team order also affects the team order. So my Tingyun is in front of my Yangqing. By the way, you can see this really quickly by going 1, 2, 3, 4. My Tingyun is here, so that means my Tingyun is going to perform an action before my Yangqing. So that means if you have like a buff, more specifically for harmony characters and nihilism characters, you're gonna want to put them in front of your main damage dealer so that they can be buffed or debuffed right before a big attack. Think of it as like having your Bennett ult if you play Genshin right before you use your like Tartaglia. Why don't I want my Yangqing to be hit? And this is a really and probably the most important tip I can give you in this video, other than skill management, is just read. Read the character details, read their kits, look up a guide, do anything, and understand the characters that you have and the characters that you're using. So if I go ahead and look at my Yangqing here, let's take a look at his traces. Okay, so he has an ultimate ability, absolutely goated. Basically, anytime he uses his ultimate, he has a 65% chance to crit because it's 5% base. This gives 60% without any sort of other stats. And then you also have another crit damage buff when he has his soul steel sync. Let's just call it his sync skill, and does like a buttload of damage. His E skill activates his sync passive. And then you take a look at this. When sync is active, Yangqing is less likely to be attacked by enemies. Yangqing's crit rate is increased by 16% and his crit damage is increased by 18%. So now basically like at an 80% chance to crit with his ultimate without any sort of substats. Look at a character like Bronya. You look at her traces. At level 1, she provides crit damage equal to 12% of her own crit damage plus 12% for 2 turns. And so you can just build 100%, 200% crit damage on your Bronya, have that be transferred over to your Yangqing, and now your Yangqing is always going to be critting, and he's going to be critting for like 300% crit damage. Then he follows up and does an attack, blah blah blah, and then you see here when Yangqing receives damage, the soul steel sync effect will disappear. So that means all these buffs, all these benefits that he gets from his E ability are just completely negated whenever he's hit. So you don't want Yangqing to get hit. Most people will look at that and say, okay, I don't want him to get hit, I don't want him to take damage, so to circumvent that, I'm going to use a shield. Oh, what's a great shielder? March. Let's throw in March in here. Right, so now let's just say this is your team. This is not a very good team, obviously, but let's just say, for example, this is your team, right? You then use March's ability to go and shield Yangqing. But that's a stupid idea because you didn't read. You look at March's traces. What does her E skill do? Okay, provides a single ally which can absorb shields. Oh wow, that's a lot. Okay. If the ally's current percent is 30% or higher, blah blah blah. If the ally's current HP percentage is 30% or higher, greatly increases the chance of enemies attacking that ally. So now your shield is on Yangqing, and he's more likely to be attacked, which means enemies are going to come at him. Maybe 2 enemies are going to come at him, and the shield's going to break, and you're going to lose the soul sync passive, and then you're going to maul and then quit the game. So then what do we do here? How do we make it so that our Yangqing isn't taking much damage? Well, instead of buffing up and putting a shield on Yangqing with March, you instead would want to do it on Step Onechan, right? So you look at Step Onechan, his E skill increases Trailblazer's damage reduction by 42% and gains 1 Magma Will with a 100% base chance to taunt all enemies for 1 turn. And then as you can see here, he gains some benefit from actually being hit. So now you can taunt the enemies, and they're more likely to hit him if you don't have your E skill up. If you have March's skill up and the shield is still active, he'll still be more likely to be hit and gain those benefits from being hit while also protecting Yangqing. And on top of this, if you don't know, preservation characters have a very high and more likely chance to be targeted the enemy than the hunt characters. The hunt characters inherently have less chance to be targeted. So Yang Qing now has less chance to be targeted from his passive skill, less chance at a baseline because he's a hunt character, and because the enemies will be taunted, and March's shield will also encourage enemies to be hitting Step on HN. Now your Yang Qing is going to be completely safe. He'll probably never be hit unless it's like a boss AoE attack or something like that that hits all the characters. And even then, you can still maybe plan around that by using his E skill right before you use his ultimate so that you still get those sync passive buffs. So basically, essentially what I'm saying here is you want to look at all your characters and see what kind of synergies they have and how to best maximize their synergies with each other. So skill point management and generation is probably the single most important thing in order for you to maximize your team's DPS and overall effectiveness. You're going to want to make a balanced team so that your skill management and your skill point usage is going to be balanced and you're not finding yourself running out of skill points. So for example, Ting Yun is a great character for generating skill points because she increases her own speed and also her E skill lasts for 3 turns. So you're not going to have to use your E skill, or in my case, I won't have to use my E skill on my Yang Qing every turn. It's only going to be once every 3 turns. And instead, I can just focus on auto attacking to self-sustain my skill points for my Ting Yun. Another example might be Natasha. Natasha is probably going to be your main source of skill generation because you're not going to be using her skill all the time because you don't need healing all the time, especially if you have good uptime on her ultimate ability. So with that skill point generation, I can make sure that my sync passive is always going to be up on my Yang Qing and set up my Yang Qing to do a lot of damage. It's very just situational. Skill points are generated and how they're used, but in general, support type characters are going to be the ones that generate skill points for you because they don't need to use their E skill all the time. And you're going to be funneling in those skill points so that your main DPS can unload and do a bunch of damage. So that's kind of how all these team synergies, skill point management, how they all kind of work together so that you can find the most success within your teams. Hopefully this video helped out a lot, and if it did, please consider subscribing. Remember to take care and have an awesome day.